Chapter 8. The Rise of the Railway Mail Service. Sorting on the Move, 1864. The year is 1864. The Civil War is still raging in the South, a storm of fire and lead. But in the North, a different kind of engine is driving the nation forward. It is an engine of steam, steel, and speed. The railroad. By the mid-1860s, the iron rails had stitched the landscape together. Trains could travel at 30, sometimes 40 miles per hour, a speed that seemed miraculous compared to the horse. But there was a flaw in the system, a fatal inefficiency. While the trains were fast, the mail was slow. Under the old system, mail traveled as freight. A bag of letters from New York destined for Chicago would be thrown onto a train. The train would speed to a distributing post office, a massive brick warehouse in a city like Buffalo or Cleveland. There, the bag would be unloaded, the train would leave, the bag would sit. It would be opened, sorted, rebagged, and then waited for the next train. The mail was moving in fits and starts. It was hurrying up only to wait. Chapter 8 of our history is the story of how the post office decided to eliminate the waiting. It is the story of a radical idea. What if the post office didn't sit on the ground? What if the post office moved? What if we sorted the mail inside the train while it was hurtling through the night at 40 miles per hour? This is the story of the Railway Mail Service, RMS. It is a story of balance, memory, and the mechanical ballet of the catcher pouch. To understand the birth of this system, we must travel to Chicago to the office of George B. Armstrong. He was the assistant postmaster of Chicago, and he was a man obsessed with time. He watched the trains arrive. He saw the mountains of unsorted mail piling up. He realized that the time spent traveling between cities was wasted time. On August 28, 1864, Armstrong's experiment began. A modified car on the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, traveling from Chicago to Clinton, Iowa, was designated as a post office on wheels. Let us step inside this car. It is not a passenger car. There are no velvet seats, no gas chandeliers, no dining tables. It is a workspace. It is a wooden box, roughly 40 feet long, riding on steel wheels. The sensory environment of the Railway Post Office, the RPO, is intense and specific. The first thing you notice is the sound. Clack, clack, whoosh. Clack, clack, whoosh. The rhythm of the wheels on the jointed rail is the heartbeat of the job. It is a loud, percussive roar that never stops. The car sways violently side to side. It jerks when the engineer applies the brakes. It shudders when it hits a curve. The second thing you notice is the smell. It is a unique perfume of industry. The sulphurous bite of coal smoke drifting back from the locomotive, the metallic tang of hot grease on the axles, the dry dust of the canvas mail sacks, and the sharp scent of sealing wax. In this vibrating, noisy, smoky box, the railway post office clerks, the people of the Railway Mail Service, performed their work. These men were the elite of the Postal Service. They were the lords of the rail. While a clerk in a stationary post office stood on a solid floor, the railway post office clerk had to do his job while surfing. The interior of the car was a marvel of cabinetry. The walls were lined with pigeonholes, hundreds of small wooden cubbies. These cases were curved slightly, wrapping around the clerk so he could reach them all without taking a step. Below the pigeonholes were the pouch racks. These were iron frames that held the canvas sacks open, mouths gaping wide, ready to swallow the mail. Imagine the physical act of sorting in 1864. The clerk stands in the center of the car. The floor is covered in sawdust to absorb moisture and provide grip. He grabs a handful of letters. He reads the address on the top one, Marietta, Ohio. He does not have time to think. His hand must move instantly. He knows that Marietta mail goes into the Parksburg and Cincinnati pouch. He flicks his wrist. The letter flies through the air and lands in the correct pigeonhole. Snap, flip, snap, flip. He does this while his knees are bent to absorb the shock of the train. He does this while the oil lamps hanging from the ceiling sway wildly, casting dancing shadows on the wall. He does this while the train rounds a bend and centrifugal force tries to throw him against the wall. He does not miss. If the letters are the software of the system, the catcher pouch is the hardware. This mechanism is the defining technical detail of the era.
The problem was simple. The train was fast. It did not want to stop at every tiny village to exchange mail. Stopping a steam train took time. It wasted coal. It slowed the schedule. But the village of Podunk, population 300, needed its mail, and it had mail to send. How do you exchange physical objects between a stationary platform and a moving train doing 45 miles per hour? You use the catcher. Let us visualize the mechanics of this exchange. It is a moment of high tension and precision. On the side of the RPO car, there was a heavy sliding door. Across this doorway ran a horizontal iron bar. Attached to this bar was a steel arm shaped like a V lying on its side. This was the catcher arm. On the ground, at the station platform, stood the mail crane. This was a wooden post, looking somewhat like a gallows. It had two arms, a top one and a bottom one. The mail sack intended for the train was cinched in the middle, looking like an hourglass. It was hung between the two arms of the crane, suspended in the air, right next to the tracks. The process of the catch required perfect timing and local knowledge. It is 2 a.m. The train is thundering through the darkness of rural Illinois. The RPO clerk is sorting furiously, but part of his brain is counting the minutes. He is listening to the whistle of the locomotive. Woo, woo! One long, two short. That is the signal for a station approach. The clerk knows from memory that this is the station where a catch must be made. He puts down his letters. He walks to the sliding door. He opens it. The wind rushes in. It is a gale-force blast carrying rain or snow or dust. The noise of the wheels is deafening now, an unmuted roar. The ground outside is a blur of gray and black, rushing past faster than the eye can focus. The clerk puts on his goggles to protect his eyes from cinders. He looks out into the dark. He is looking for a landmark, a specific tree, a water tower, a white fence that tells him the crane is exactly 10 seconds away. He grabs the sack of mail destined for the town. He cannot just throw it. The wind would suck it under the wheels. He must kick it or toss it with a specific outward trajectory, aiming for a spot on the ground where it will roll safely. Whoosh! He tosses the outbound sack. It tumbles into the darkness. Now the inbound catch. He grabs the handle of the steel catcher arm. He raises it. The V shape points forward into the wind. He stands back. This is the danger zone. If the arm hits a telegraph pole or a signal stand, it could be ripped off or it could derail the car. He holds the arm steady. He squints into the wind. Suddenly, thwack! It is a violent sound, like a baseball bat hitting a heavy bag. The steel arm on the train hits the suspended mail sack on the crane. The force of the train's motion drives the sack into the V, where a latch snaps shut, locking it in place. The sack is ripped from the crane. The clerk immediately hauls the arm back inside the car. He slides the door shut, cutting off the roar of the wind. He unlatches the sack. It is heavy, cold from the night air. He dumps it onto the sorting table. Fresh mail. The train never touched the brakes. It never slowed down.
The exchange happened in a blink of an eye. This maneuver was performed thousands of nights across the entire United States. It was a dangerous game. If the clerk raised the arm too early, he might catch a signal light. If he raised it too late, he would miss the pouch entirely, leaving the town's mail hanging on the crane like a rejected gift. And sometimes the pouch on the crane was frozen solid. When the catcher arm hit a frozen canvas sack at 50 miles per hour, the shock could shatter the iron bar, sending shrapnel inside the car. But when it worked, it was magic. It allowed a letter to be dropped off in a town and a reply to be picked up without the great iron horse ever breaking its stride. The men who did this job were required to have a memory that bordered on encyclopedic. This is the intellectual side of the sorting on the move. A clerk couldn't just know geography, he had to know schemes. A scheme was a mental map of the mail network. It wasn't enough to know that a letter was going to Springfield. You had to know which train connected to Springfield at the next junction. You had to know that the 4:00 p.m. train to St. Louis was canceled on Sundays, so the mail had to be routed through Indianapolis instead. They memorized thousands of post offices. They memorized the timetables of intersecting railroads. They carried the entire logistics network of the United States in their heads. To ensure they knew their stuff, the post office administered the case exam. Imagine a clerk sitting in a quiet room on his day off. In front of him is a mock-up of a pigeonhole case. He has a stack of small cards. On each card is the name of a post office.
He has to sort the cards into the correct holes. He has to do it fast, and he has to do it perfectly. The passing grade was 97%. Most clerks prided themselves on scoring 99.99%. To miss 3 cards out of 1,000 was considered a disgrace. They practiced at home, sorting cards at their kitchen tables until their hands moved automatically. They dreamed in zip codes before zip codes existed. As the railway mail service expanded in the late 1860s and 1870s, it changed the very concept of the train itself. The fast mail trains were born. These were trains that carried no passengers, no freight, only mail. The most famous of these launched in 1875 on the New York Central line. The cars were painted a gleaming, stark white with gold lettering, the fast mail. To the public, these white trains were ghostly apparitions. They ran mostly at night. They moved faster than anything else on the rails because they had the highest priority. When the fast mail was on the line, all other trains, freight, passenger, cattle, had to pull onto the siding and wait. The white train screamed through the night, a streak of light and noise. Inside, the clerks were working in their shirt sleeves, sweating under the lamps, processing tons of paper. Let us return to the atmosphere of the car at night. It is 3:30 a.m. The rush of the major cities is over. The clerk has a moment of respite. He pours a cup of coffee from a pot kept warm on a small cast iron stove in the corner of the car. He sits on a stool for a moment. He lights a pipe. The smoke drifts up to mix with the oil lamp soot. He looks at his hands. They are stained with ink and dust. His shoulders ache from the constant swaying. His legs are tired from standing on the vibrating floor. But there is a deep satisfaction in the work. He knows that in the bags he has just locked, there are business contracts that will build bridges. There are love letters that will result in marriages. There are death notices that will bring families together to mourn. He is the unseen weaver of the nation's fabric. He is doing this work while the recipients are asleep in their beds. When the train arrives in the city at dawn, perhaps Omaha or Denver or Minneapolis, the work is done. The mail is already sorted. It is ready for the carriers to walk it to the doorsteps. The speed of the delivery seems like magic to the citizen, but the clerk knows the cost. The cost was risk. The RPO cars were usually placed at the front of the train, right behind the locomotive and the coal tender. This was a strategic choice. It separated the valuable mail from the passengers.
but it was also a fatal one. In a head-on collision, the locomotive would be crushed, the tender would be shoved backward, and the wooden RPO car would be splintered like matchwood. Railway mail clerks had one of the highest fatality rates of any profession in the 19th century. They were killed in wrecks. They were burned in fires started by the overturned stoves and oil lamps. They were crushed by shifting cargo. There was a grim camaraderie among them. They knew that every time they stepped onto the car, they were stepping into the danger zone. Yet they took immense pride in their title. They were federal agents. They carried pistols to protect the registered mail. They were the guardians of the post. Let us end this chapter with a slow, hypnotic image of the train moving across the landscape. The year is still 1864, or perhaps 1865. The Civil War is ending, the country is healing, and the train is moving west. The moon is high over the Iowa cornfields. The silver rails stretch out to the horizon, converging in the distance. The train is a long, dark snake with a heart of fire. Inside the third car, a light glows yellow. Through the window, if you were standing in the field, you would see the silhouette of a man. He is swaying rhythmically. His arm moves back and forth, back and forth. Snap, flip, snap, flip. He is sorting the chaos of the world into order. He approaches a sleeping town. He opens the door. The wind howls. He extends the iron arm. Thwack! He catches the message. He delivers the news. The door slides shut. The train does not stop. The whistle blows, a long, lonely note that drifts over the farmhouse roofs, and the mail moves on, rushing through the dark, carrying the dreams of a nation toward the morning.